Welcome back to ITC Presents Swabhiman Bharat, a Network 18 initiative. Today we are talking about pivoting amidst the pandemic because it is enterprises who have been able to transform their products, their services, their business models, and have stayed agile through the last 1 year that have been perhaps able to beat the pandemic so far. Mr. Sehgal, what is that going to mean for the MSME sector? It is perhaps the hardest hit by the pandemic. What is the road to recovery looking like right now? And have you seen significant emergence of innovative products and services from small businesses or significant transformations in their business models?
Definitely. I think as Keshav mentioned, the pause in the speed of day-to-day activities gave time to step back and carry through to fruition and implementation various ideas that were there in people's minds. Now, this ranged, for instance, in our specific instance, to 2 or 3 product innovations that we had in mind. We were able to complete the development of that because the day-to-day production pressures were not there. The production facilities, unlike large units, our development is done on the production machines. We don't have a separate R&D department which can, or a laboratory that can make the innovations and test them out. So we have to divert from the day-to-day production. And the slowdown in that, or the gap which was created in the production facilities, enabled us to do that. So that was one thing. Similarly, in the churning of on a softer side, we had been wanting to implement an ERP package, which had been a desire for a long time. And we realized that we do have time to move and think more in that. So we have not implemented it, but we have begun the journey. We have identified a vendor and a party who can help us along that way, and we have started on that process. I'm sure that going ahead, 6 months from now, we will be using that very effectively. One of the immediate results we've seen from the thinking which was generated by that is that our inventory levels today are about 25 to 30% less than they were in the usual times, and yet we are able to continue our normal business operations with far more efficiency, with far less blockage of inventory, and much more efficient and continuous production without stoppages due to mismatch of availability of materials and the production that is required. So instead of making to an estimated demand, we are now able to make to actual orders as they come in and respond to that requirement in a time frame which is acceptable to the end customer. So by making to order, we have not elongated our production cycle time so that the end customer is not seeing any delay, but we are seeing the benefit of that, of having faster delivery cycles, which is encouraging us to think of increasing volumes without massive new investments in plant and machinery and hard goods in the coming year. And I think that a lot of MSMEs are now realizing that they have managed with lesser resources, and there are ways to do that, and it is advantageous to everybody to walk along that path.
Let's also shift focus a little bit on the whole Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme and the larger dream for India that the government has. Keshav, beyond the resilience and the pivots that India Inc. has really shown over the last 1 year, what will it really take for us to become truly self-reliant or Atmanirbhar, and also to become a global destination for manufacturing? Do you have a wish list for the government?
Yes, Mridu, I definitely do. But I would like to say first that the journey has started. If you look at Century, for instance, there are a lot of items that prior to pandemic we weren't manufacturing in India, and as people have, as Mr. Stegel said, that there is already a, a disruption that is caused because during the pandemic period you weren't able to import certain things, you weren't able to get deliveries, you weren't able to have reliable international vendors because the supply chain across the world was disrupted. So I think that a lot of items have scope. A lot of items that we have been importing have the scope to be manufactured in India. Some of them we are manufacturing in-house. A lot of others where we are facing issues importing raw material, importing some spares and stores, we have now got Indian vendors who are actually cheaper. But it was just that earlier we did not know that they existed, or earlier the supply chain infrastructure was such that you would not look other than the original supplier. Going forward, I think that definitely there are some things that we need to do. If you look at Other countries, the rate of interest is perhaps still lower than ours. I know that we have reduced our interest rates for the past few years, but still, if you compare us to certain other developing countries, I think we have higher rates of interest. I think that in terms of licenses and in terms of other permissions that are required to start business, there are still certain disadvantages that we have in India compared to other countries. And lastly, the cost of land in India and the process of getting land is far more difficult. So I think if we can bring about these few changes, if the government can actively take these up, then the road to Atmanirbhar Bharat suddenly looks much easier.
Right, absolutely. Rajendra, would you like to add on to that wish list for the government that Keshav just mentioned? And also, what has the big COVID-19 opportunity been for the real estate sector at large? And what transformations do you foresee in the new normal in the post-COVID-19 world?
So in terms of the wish list, I just want to add one thing, which is from 1st April 2019, the government of India has withdrawn the input tax credit on the real estate. So when we sell and when you collect the tax, you used to get a set off on what we were paying tax on the input materials. That's been withdrawn. That has actually pushed up the prices for the end customer. So if government can look at that, that's one our big wish list. Second is cement, which is a key ingredient for not only for us, for the entire infrastructure, is taxed at 28%, a luxury tax. Cement is certainly not a luxury item. So we would like the government to look at this and probably rationalize the duty on cement. These are the two big requests that we have from the government. The way the business is transforming even before pandemic, but particularly during the pandemic in the real estate, in the residential real estate, is that there is a huge brand consolidation that's happening. Therefore, most customers are now looking to buy their houses from large established players, and therefore the market share of large players like us in larger cities is going up. And that's the trend that I see. There is clearly a demand for larger houses, integrated communities where you have a place to stay, place to work, a place for your children to study with a hospital, and probably some amount of retail around. I think that would be the trend for the future, with a contained work environment where you don't have to spend hours on commute. I think that's the two clear trends I see: brand consolidation and larger integrated communities where people would like to live, work, learn, and play.
All of you in your own way are contributing to the whole Atmanirbhar Bharat dream of the government. Mr. Sehgal, the MSME sector is crucial for this dream to really take off in India. Give us a sense of how MSMEs can really increase their own competitiveness and play a much larger role in the global supply chains in the future.
Yeah, I think MSMEs have taken very definite steps to become self-reliant within India. And I think particularly a lot of MSMEs are facing competition from low price, low quality imports of products which could very well be made in India. Now, with the restrictions being put on cross-border trade with our what we call our neighboring countries, land sharing countries, there has been a pickup in the demand for products made by MSMEs, both due to patriotic reasons, and then once it begins due to patriotic reasons, the buyer realizes that there is no reason not to make this standard business practice. It makes economic sense for him, it makes technical sense for him, and we, through another organization which I'm involved with, we organized a very interesting session with BHEL, which put together a list of 100 items which they're buying, and what is the specification to which they're buying, what is the value of purchases every year, and they're encouraging MSMEs to come forward and say, we can make this and we can offer this. Again, in our particular instance, we had a very, very low import content of under 10%, but even so, we decided to move forward with more indigenization, or at least variety of suppliers, vendors throughout the world. And we were able to find better quality products at maybe marginally higher prices. But when your import content is 10%, if you get a better supplier with a better quality and better delivery at, let us say, a 10% higher price, that makes an impact of not more than 1% on your overall cost and 1% on your price, which I think is a very affordable trade-off, which is something one did never thought of. But now that is being adequately thought of, and some of the larger companies are now looking at finding that they must develop local vendors for items which they found very easy, particularly multinationals, to import from their global supply chain. And they've been actively looking at why they should not source from India. The issues like shortage of shipping containers, increase in freight rates, all that is helping tremendously in having the larger companies look at MSMEs who are the next level down as potential vendors for them, rather than finding the easy way out of going to the vendors who are supplying their international companies from other countries. So I think this is a very, very good opportunity for Indian MSMEs, and we have to take advantage, and we are taking advantage of it.
Absolutely. Innovation, efficiency, agility, all have been crucial to surviving what has been one of the most tough years of our lives. Gentlemen, thank you very much for sharing your very, very valuable insights and experiences today on Swabhiman Bharat. Good luck to each of you for the future. With that, it's a wrap of this special conversation. News and updates continue on Network 18. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye. Hello and welcome to ITC Presents Swabhiman Bharat, a Network 18 initiative. I'm Mridu Bhandari. The last 1 year has perhaps been the most transformative for enterprises around the world. Companies have had to innovate on products, on services, on processes, and even on business models to really survive the pandemic. And only those with the maximum agility, flexibility, high innovation, and tremendous resilience have been able to successfully ride out the storm so far. So our focus today is on pivoting amidst the pandemic, and I'm joined today by Keshav Bhajanka, Executive Director of Century Ply, Ashok Sehgal, Co-Chairman, CII National MSME Council and Managing Director of Frontier Technologies, and Rajendra Joshi, CEO of Residential at Brigade Group. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us here today. Well, the pandemic has really forced many businesses around the world to pivot in order to stay relevant. So let me first begin by asking each of you what your companies have been doing and how have you all been innovating over the last 1 year or so. Ashok, if I may begin with you, at Frontier Technologies, how was business really impacted by the pandemic? How have you innovated on the product front, on the process front? How have you managed demand and supply over the last 1 year or so?
It was a very challenging time. And as many people have said, this is something which is the new natural, which we all had to adapt to. The initial period of the lockdown was really very difficult because we had to meet expenses of our staff and workers with very little income coming in. And particularly the timing was bad because the last few weeks of the financial year are always times for a lot of shipments and a lot of payments to be made by suppliers. So that was a problem for the lockdown period of about 3 months. But thereafter, we were able to come back in about another 4 to 6 weeks. And I think most MSMEs have been able to recover and adapt to this new normal that people talk about. And I think going forward, we're all very hopeful that things will not be as bad as they looked when the whole thing started. And we are well on the way to recovery.
Good to hear that optimism from you, Mr. Sehgal. Let me also bring in Rajendra Joshi. The past 1 year has been particularly tough for the real estate segment. Give us a sense of, what sort of an impact did the initial months of the lockdown have, particularly on your business operations? How did you manage, and how have you managed to stay agile through the last 1 year?
The pandemic did really cause a huge disruption in the real estate business because real estate is essentially a brick and mortar business. Our customers come to sites, buy their homes. Our construction happens absolutely on site. And therefore, in the first few months of the pandemic, particularly the first 2 months of the pandemic, we had to completely reorganize our business model because in the residential business, particularly, the customers come to sites to visit, to see how the work is happening, what is there in the show apartments, to experience the product. Only then would they buy, because this would be one of their largest investments in their life. This had to completely stop. So we had to switch to a new normal in terms of interacting with customers through video calls, how to explain the product to them through virtual video tours of our show apartments of our project, how to train our salespeople in order to how to explain the product to the customers. So all of this was really a challenging experience. In the first quarter, our business fell by almost 60%. We had only about 35-40% of our quarter-on-quarter number that we had experienced in the previous year. But we did quite a few things, including how to enable the customer visit the sites virtually, experience the product, and do the booking online, including signing the application forms, paying the money, etc. So all of that was done in order to ensure that the bookings continue despite the hit of the pandemic. It was a tough time, but I think all of us worked to ensure that the customer had a fairly good experience of the product, and it really the digital platforms really helped us during the pandemic.
Right, absolutely. It's been an innovative year for everyone. And Keshav, what about you? You innovated on the product front with your ViroKill technology. How successful has that move been? In fact, you even joined hands with CNBC TV18 to create a virus-free television news studio. And I've got to say that that's a pretty innovative move. But aside from the innovation, how difficult was it to really strategize, to put in the investment and really launch a new product at this scale and speed during the pandemic?
So, Mridu, I think you've already hit the nail on its head. It was extremely challenging. It was extremely difficult. But with a team as strong as we have, with partners such as yourself, who are willing to innovate, willing to walk hand in hand with us, we were able to roll out an initiative that we thought was impossible to roll out in that time frame. We actually came up with ViroKill in the month of April, and as you know, April was one of the most challenging months. That was when the lockdown was in full effect, and our factory team actually worked really, really hard. They were able to successfully develop this technology, post which our marketing team was able to come up with a communication strategy in a month, which normally takes us 6 months. So I think that it was an extremely challenging but extremely fulfilling time for us. It was a product launch that taught us that we can work at a great pace, at a pace faster than what we are used to. I think the company's balance sheet and the fact that we are practically a zero debt company helped a lot, because that meant that financially we had all the resources that were required. But to be honest, I had my doubts initially whether we would be able to launch ViroKill in that short time span, and by the grace of God, we were able to.
Right. Okay, absolutely. Mr. Sehgal, as far as the MSME segment is concerned, digital technology adoption has been accelerated for them as well. What are some of the big challenges that MSMEs have faced in this time to really quickly adopt digital technologies or scale up the technologies that they had already adopted? And how have some of them really leveraged technology innovatively in order to stay afloat during this tough year?
There are two things which I would like to talk about in this, Vidhu. First is the problem created by migrant workers not being available. I think it has forced MSMEs more than anybody else to look at innovative technologies which will improve productivity and involve less human interaction. Now, there is a question of whether this is good in terms of overall employment numbers, but I think the fact that there have been recent complaints of a shortage of workers shows that workers who have gone back are happier to be back in their village, and the industry is managing without them. So I think that's a win-win situation rather than people crying over the fact that there's a shortage of workers, and that is definitely something which has been helpful. The other thing is the use of digital interaction with your financial institutions. On one level, we were able to organize a digital interaction where we had something like 1,500 applicants for bank loans come online and approach a consortium, a grouping of 25 or 30 banks to whom they could interact over a 1 week, what we call a money mobilization week. So it showed people that you can apply for loans online and have provided you have all your data. So when we talk of MSMEs being in the non-organized sector, I think these have been tremendous incentives for MSMEs to think of the advantages of coming into the organized sector, being counted, being visible, submitting your data both to your lenders and the government, and enabling the MSME sector as a whole to be responded to in the way in which they need. So I think these are two of the very big benefits of the limitation on physical restriction and the use of technology to reach out.
Right. Okay. Well, Keshav, would you say that the size of your company was also very advantageous to you, especially for launching a new product? In these times, this is a product that was based on nanotechnology. You launched it during the lockdown. How did technology really play a pivotal role in helping this launch? And would you say that now in the future, you will have a continued focus on nanotechnology-based products and innovate more on that front?
I think we need to take this in two facets. On the one hand, the size of the company makes it far easier to launch things due to the fact that we have the financial resources to bring about that launch. But having, for instance, in the case of ViroKill, we had the marketing team, we had the factory team, we had the resources to put the message out. So that made it much easier to launch a new technology. Having said that, when you look at the other end of the spectrum, when you look at changes to the way we operate, changes to the culture of the business, that is one area where the larger the size of the company is, the more difficult it is to cause those changes. For instance, we are trying to roll out a Salesforce automation app for 2 years prior to the pandemic. But we were always unsuccessful because there was a lot of resistance internally. People were not willing to change. During the course of the pandemic, because there was no sale, it was far easier to roll out a Salesforce automation tool. So I think it is a double-edged sword. But yes, when it comes to new launches, new developments, I think the size of the company has really helped us to develop and to get our product to market fast.
Right. Well, good to hear that. Indeed, I think one of the silver linings of the pandemic has been that it has given all of you time to really think and innovate. The lockdowns were perhaps a boon in that sense. And on that note, let's head into a short break right now. But the conversation on pivoting amidst the pandemic continues right here on the other side. Stay with us.